At 1:23 a.m., a nuclear reactor exploded. The Soviet Union tried to pretend it hadn't. For 36 hours, the world was kept in the dark. But radiation does not obey secrecy. And what happened that night at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant would expose more than a reactor flaw, it would expose a system built to hide its own dangers. The most catastrophic chapter in 1986 began when Anatoly Dyatlov, deputy chief engineer at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, ordered a late-night test that would unravel one of the 20th century's most tightly held secrets. It was April 25 to the 26th, 1986. Plant Unit 4 was scheduled for a safety test, simulating a power failure to prove that emergency turbines could keep coolant pumps running during the brief blackout between grid failure and backup generator startup. The physics were unforgiving. The RBMK reactor at the heart of the plant had a positive void coefficient, a dangerous design quirk that could make the core suddenly more reactive as steam formed. Operators, pressed to meet schedules and working with incomplete training, let power fall too low, battled xenon poisoning, and withdrew control rods to restore output, leaving the core in an unstable, underprotected state. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, when the test was finally carried out, everything went wrong. A chain of human choices collided with an engineered vulnerability. When the AZ-5 emergency shutdown was triggered, graphite-tipped control rods, intended to moderate the reaction, initially displaced coolant and injected a short, massive surge of reactivity. The reactor disintegrated in a series of explosions. A steam blast. Then a second, less understood shock, that blew the 1,000-ton lid off the pressure vessel and ignited the graphite moderator. Flames and a glowing, radioactive inferno belched into the sleeping skies above Pripyat. The immediate horror was not just fire, but the calculus of secrecy. Firefighters arrived without suits or radiation meters. They splashed water on a core that did not benefit from conventional extinguishing. Many soon developed acute radiation sickness. Dozens of plant workers and first responders would die within weeks. Hundreds more suffered severe exposure. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to 50,000, was left in the dark. Official statements minimized the event. For more than a day the Soviet system muffled alarms. No mass evacuation. No warning to gardeners, school children, or hospital workers. The cover-up fractured on April 28. When Swedish radiation monitors detected contamination and pressed the Kremlin to admit a nuclear accident. From the start, a controversy brewed over blame. Moscow's reflex was to scapegoat operators, Dyatlov and others, for errors in procedure. That narrative fit the need for a tidy explanation. But the deeper conspiracy lay in suppressed truths. RBMK reactors had a dangerous positive void coefficient. Their control rods had graphite tips that guaranteed a transient spike. Valery Legasov, a Soviet nuclear scientist who later led the investigative commission, would risk everything to expose that reality. In closed sessions, and later in candid testimony, he pointed to design failures as the engine of catastrophe, not merely human negligence. His dissent made him an uneasy hero. 2 years after Chernobyl, Legasov took his own life, leaving audio tapes that indicted more than the night team at the plant. The aftermath read like a slow-burning horror. 340,000 people permanently resettled. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone that turned a modern Soviet city into a rusting ghost. And the mobilization of some 600,000 liquidators, soldiers, miners, and technicians, who scraped contaminated soil, buried animals, and built a hastily conceived sarcophagus, often with inadequate protection. Chernobyl cut through the Soviet myth of infallibility. Its horror was not only the blast and the blackened landscape, but the revelation that a state apparatus could hide danger and reward silence. The conspiracy was less a cloak-and-dagger plot, than a system that privileged production schedules and political appearances over transparency and safety. Walking the abandoned streets of Pripyat today, the silence is the final confession. Playgrounds frozen under rust. Classrooms dusted with yesterday's lessons. And the sarcophagus hunched like an accreting wound. History remembers the names. Dyatlov, Legasov, Brukhanov. But it should also remember how secrecy turned a technical disaster into a moral one. That is the real horror Chernobyl etched into history. A calamity made worse, by what people chose not to say.